Hello and welcome to the Built to Serve podcast. I'm your host, Mike Farve. I'm here with Sergeant First Class Rolan Daniel Wade. Roland, how are you doing today?
Pretty good, Mike. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Glad to be here. Glad to have you and be a part of the Built to Serve podcast. And just to kind of give everybody a little information, you know, Daniel and I, we go way back. We actually served together in the Army National Guard and Mississippi Army National Guard. In 2005, we were actually deployed together. And we'll get into that. So, Daniel, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from. Take me all the way up into high school.
All right, so Sergeant First Class, Rolan Wade, Daniel for short. Weird people from Mississippi go by their middle name a lot. Born and raised Mississippi, Greene County, right up the road from where you're from.
Right.
I think Greene County is the home of the Alabama or the Irvington office for most of them. Now, Mississippi National Guard still. I'm AGR, work at Camp Shelby. I teach the maneuver senior leader course.
Okay.
So that's for your infantry and your armor guys whenever they're, E6 trying to make E7. Mm-hmm. Still live right there in Greene County. Married, got 3 kids. Just, enjoying life as it comes.
I hear you. Yep. I hear you. So you were, I know we were talking before, so you were born in Laurel, Mississippi.
Yep. Born in Jones County and Laurel, Mississippi. And then actually lived in Perry County there for, I guess about the first 9-10 years of my life. Mm-hmm. Then my mom kind of moved around a little bit. And then when I was 10, we moved to Neely.
Okay.
Most of the people on here that see me and know me are going to know my grandparents. Moved across the street from their gun shop and started going to, Sand Hill School. And from there, I, went to Greene County, and that's where I wound up, graduating from.
Okay. So what's life like as a young man in Greene County, Mississippi?
So you're hunting, you're fishing.
Loving every day.
Loving every day. Riding four-wheelers, like I said, hunting, fishing, playing out in the woods.
That's right.
Just good, wholesome country living, in my opinion.
Right. So at this point, you're a young man, and again, we had talked previously. At what age do you say you realized that you wanted to be a soldier in the Army?
I'd probably say somewhere around, 14, 15.
Okay.
Somewhere around my freshman, sophomore year in high school. We're from the same area.
Right.
And there's only really 3, I hate to say only 3 options, but for most, there's only 3 options.
That's true.
Some do go to college. I'd kind of already accepted at that point that, I'm no dummy, but I'd had enough school. Like, just 12 years, I knew that was going to be enough for me.
Right.
If I wanted to go to school, it would be sometime later in my life.
Okay.
And that I didn't want one of those 3 options. Didn't want to work construction. At that time, didn't really have anybody in my life that worked construction. So my only really introduction or what I've seen of construction was the people that came to my grandparents' gun shop, mm-hmm. To pawn their guns to get to the next job that always seemed to be broke and was driving a broke down vehicle and whatnot. Yep. And that was what I knew. I didn't see the other side of it, that where, folks like Jason Platt, for instance, mm-hmm. that they also done that, but they were coming in and buying 3 and 4 guns, especially him and his daddy at Christmas. And, that was the other side of it, but I never really, don't put that together.
Right.
So I didn't want to be gone. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to work in the logging woods. I knew that really wasn't for me, and I didn't want to work at the prison.
Right.
So I started looking around and, what fits me? I like to be outside. I like to hunt. I like to fish. I love the outdoors. I think the Army's a good fit.
Okay.
And then, my freshman year, 9/11 hit. And that really kind of, drove it home that, I've been disrespected. Our country's been disrespected. I am a proud American. If I get the opportunity to go right or wrong, that's something that I feel like I should do.
Right.
I almost feel like, this country has given, so much opportunity to me that it's the least I can do to go protect it.
Right.
That's just, kind of my outlook on it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And like I said earlier, you and I, we kind of built a really, really strong relationship as battle buddies, what we call battle buddies in the Army, in 2005, and kind of, lost touch there for a while afterwards. And believe it or not, just coming to work for a company like Performance, it kind of brought us back together in a sense, and kind of rekindled this friendship, this bond that you and I have shared for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Almost 20 years.
I know, right? And you still look like you're 20, so like a baby. So, yeah, you're in high school. You're about to join the military at some point. You ultimately make the decision you're going to join what wound being the Army National Guard. What triggered that decision?
So just going back to, like I said, between 9/11 and me getting up on into high school, I actually was at the MEPS, which is the Military Entry Port, I think is what it's called. But it's where you go to actually go through your medical physical and talk to the people to sign your oath of enlistment and all that good stuff.
And where you swear in.
Where you swear in. So being in that I was going to join the Guard, I was there on my 17th birthday. So January 21st, 2004, I was at the New Orleans MEPS, more or less enlisting and taking my oath on my 17th birthday.
Wow.
Then with it still being the Guard, I had the option of what they used to call the split op training, which I think they still do, is where for, Guard individuals, you can go to basic between your junior and senior year, and then whenever you graduate high school, you go on to your advanced individual training, and you become a fully qualified soldier at that point.
Right. That's what we call AIT,
Yep,
right? Your
AIT.
military schooling.
Yep. It's where you go get your MOS, your military occupational specialty.
Okay. And you were a 12 Bravo, correct?
Yep. So when I joined, this was back before YouTube, the internet being, what we know as of it today, and all this information being out there. And I've always been a little jump the gun. So not long after I took the ASVAB and the scores come back, the Guard recruiter shows up. I didn't ask a lot of questions. Only thing I knew was, hey, this is what I want to do. This is the Army. And then the National Guard part just didn't really, I guess, stick.
Right.
So I go to basic training. I'm a 12 Bravo, kind of got wool pulled over a little bit, my eyes on that. I didn't realize that I could pick my MOS, and that would just mean that I had to drive to a different armory somewhere in the state.
Right.
I was just pretty much under the assumption, hey, you done well enough to join. You're going to be in this local armory right here in Lucedale. They're engineers. You're going to be an engineer.
Sure. Right.
So go to basic training, and like most young privates at basic training, I start learning some things. Like the Guard's 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks during the summer, that until you've probably been in for a couple years, you're not going to be able to get full-time Guard, and that this probably isn't what I had envisioned myself doing. I wanted to be in the Army, but I wanted it to be my career, my day in, day out job, what I'd done full-time. So after I get home from basic training, I go see a active duty recruiter. So, we're a couple months into, my senior year, and I go see an active duty recruiter, and I try to do a conditional release from the Guard to go active. And that's where they just say, hey, okay, this individual is still in the military, they're still in the Army, but they're going to more or less release them from the National Guard, and they go active duty.
Okay.
So filled out one of those. And, at this time, the state of Mississippi was in mobilization. This is October of 2004.
Right.
Most of the brigade, which would be the unit of my assignment, was getting ready to go to Iraq. So we fill out the paperwork. We send it to the TAG, which is the adjutant general, which is your highest officer, in the state. And we don't hear anything back. So, kind of the old crickets. So I give her a call, and we're, this is back before CAT cards and digital signatures, and everything's got to be hand signed and all that good stuff. So I call her, and we set up another date and time, and I go back and we fill out another appointment. And then kind of already mentioned, my grandparents, everybody I think within, 100 square miles of Neely, Mississippi that hunts, fish, does anything firearm related in that time period knew who Johnson's Gun Shop was. So by virtue of that, my grandparents knew a lot of people. We had different important individuals, especially, government officials. When we start talking about politicians that, done business with my grandparents.
Right.
That's where they bought their guns. Grandpa fixed them, worked on them, all that good stuff. So when we submit this second packet for me to get out of the Guard to go active duty, my grandma calls somebody. And that somebody was somebody enough that they called the tag personally. So then the tag personally calls the highest enlisted NCO in the state, which is a state sergeant major, and he calls me personally. So little old PFC Wade is getting a cell phone call from the state sergeant major in some very firm language, wanting to know what my malfunction is and why he's got the tag calling him and want to know what is going on.
Right.
So I pretty much give him the rundown. Hey, Sergeant Major, look, I want a career. I don't think the Guard's going to provide that for me in the way I assumed or the impression I was given it was. I want to go active duty.
Right.
So his response was, well, if you want to go active duty, I got some active duty for you. You can go to Iraq. So Greene County's got a 4x4 schedule. I finished high school in December. So this is like early January of 2005. Within like 3 or 4 days, I'd made such a fuss that I had orders sending me back to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri within the week.
So this is right before you turned 18.
Yeah, this is before I turned 18. I haven't even turned 18 yet. I turned 18 at AIT.
Okay.
So I get orders to go to AIT, whereas I was supposed to went that summer after graduation. Now I'm going early.
Okay.
So I go to AIT, turn 18 at AIT, come home, graduation, everything. Daniel's getting ready to go to Iraq.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So
that's got to be stressful.
It was one of those things where I didn't even get my bonus for joining the military, the little old, I think, $1,500 that I got until we got home because I didn't have a high school diploma to submit to HR because that was one of the stipulations that you had to meet was you had to, submit your high school diploma if you joined, prior to getting it in order to meet your end of the deal before you could get a bonus.
Okay. All right. So take me back real quick to basic training, and so I'll tell a little bit about myself to kind of introduce Fort Leonard Wood. I went to basic training. So I joined right before September 11th. My DD-214 says September 9th, 2001. So 2 days, which I signed the paperwork at the recruiter's office August 27th, 2001, right? That's when me and my dad decided that was the best thing for me to do was join the Army National Guard. And some other deciding factors helped as well. Shortly thereafter, 9/11 happens. I'm off to basic training September 17th, 2001. So when I went to basic training, all the drill sergeants talked about were if you don't do exactly what we say, you're going to die.
Yeah.
So at Fort Leonard Wood, so 9/11's already happened. A few years have passed. What's the mentality of the troops coming in and how was the cycle or your cycle specifically for basic training at Fort Lost in the Woods, Missouri?
It was still a pretty, I hate to say stressed tone, but it was still a very serious tone.
Right.
This is 2004. We're only a few years, removed from 9/11. You're starting to get drill sergeants back in at that time who had deployed in the initial push, who may have went in right there after the initial push and had started seeing that insurgency that was fixing to become a problem. And it was a very serious tone. It was hey, you're going to go to Iraq.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
We're not going to be out of there anytime soon.
Right.
You're going to go to Iraq. It would be very behoove of you to go ahead and understand that and to look at everything through that lens because it's serious.
Absolutely.
You know, this is just basic training, but there's things here that could very well save your life. You know, you're going, accept that fact, and start taking your training as serious as you can.
Oh, yeah.
Because it might be the deciding factor in whether or not you come home.
That's right. And the whole time he's doing this at you, right? Knife hand, right at your face.
Yep.
That's got to be, that's stressful in itself. You know, and for those who are in the, oh gosh, those are in the Navy and in the Air Force or the Coast Guard, you get to experience a small, minute taste of how Army drill sergeants and Marine Corps drill instructors can be. I don't get me wrong. I'm sure they're tough, right? Yep. I take pride in knowing that I went to Fort Knox. For those that went to Fort Benning, they take pride. For the Marines that went to Paris Island, you hear about all these different places. You know what you don't hear about? All these airmen going to wherever they go. All these Navy men and women going to wherever they go, or Coast Guard. You know, I mean, I'm just being honest. That's what I hear, right? Yeah. I take pride in knowing that I went to a pretty tough base to do my basic training. Heck, it's a hard knocks life, right? I mean, it's just what we would all say.
You know, so I've got some family that an older cousin that joined the Air Force. I actually think she joined the Air Force after I'd already joined the Army, and their mindset's a little different. They're not as focused on the physically can you give more, physically can you take more, physically are you tough enough, mentally are you tough enough. A lot of their stressors are, do you have enough attention to detail to work on this aircraft to make sure that that lock nut that you dropped, you know you dropped it and you found it. Did you tighten all this stuff to, you know, these exact torque specs? Theirs is more, do you have the mental mentality to have that much attention to detail, because that's what those branches require.
Right. You're exactly right. And I don't mean to insult. That is definitely not to insult any branch.
Two completely different style means of preparing individuals for the branch that they're going to be in.
I think you're exactly right. I don't mean any
I still couldn't tell
insult.
You where they went though either.
Right. You know, you don't hear about them. Yep. So going back to basic training again, it's Fort Leonard Wood. So Fort Knox, we had some hills that were famous at Fort Knox. Did Fort Leonard Wood have any hills?
We've all got those same 3 hills, and they're all named the same thing.
Really?
Yep. Heartbreak, Misery, and I can't remember the third one.
I remember, but I don't think we can say it on this podcast.
Probably not.
That one was at Fort Knox. But yeah, it was Agony.
Agony. Yep. Heartbreak, Misery, and Agony.
That's it. Yeah. Yep. There was another one at Fort Knox, and those who went there can probably tell you that two-letter word or two-word.
Yeah.
Little catchphrase there. So,
I think every basic training post they went out and looked before they built it to find some hills for that exact reason.
Which one was the worst for you? Of those 3 at Fort Leonard Wood? To
be honest with you, I don't even remember.
Really?
Nope.
God, I remember all 3, and that's been since 2001.
Nope.
I remember Misery was long, dude. I mean, like it literally felt like as you were marching up this thing right on your 15K. It felt like you could lean forward and touch it, and it went as far as the eye could see. You know, you're not there. You're not doing PT on it. I mean, when you start your 15K, this is what you saw, and you're only halfway into this thing.
I guess maybe because Fort Leonard Wood is in the Ozarks.
Yeah,
and there's so many hills that just sucked that none of them just really
stuck out any more than the others?
Exactly.
I got you.
Like I can remember doing land nav in that place and looking at a topographical map and your contour lines. For those of you that know how to read a map and do stuff, it was like line, which means the terrain was literally straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down.
Constant change.
Yep. Massive elevation changes in short periods of time.
So in your basic training, when you went through, what was it? So red phase, then white phase, then blue phase, right? So did the tone change closer toward graduation from basic? Oh, they stayed strict and
So-
rough the whole way through.
For most of your combat MOSs, so, I reclassed a few years in, and we'll talk about that here in a little while. But a 12 Bravo is a combat MOS.
Okay.
That job is part of your combined arms.
Right.
They are demolition specialists. When it comes to maneuver warfare, their job is to clear obstacles. We put out obstacles to deter or defeat enemy movement. They do the same thing to us.
Okay.
So your engineers are out there clearing mines. They're out there blowing, whatever hardened structures the enemies put out to try to prevent you from maneuvering through there, blowing concertina wire or different things. So they're right there, in the front. They're not the infantry, but they're right there clearing a way for the infantry to be able to get through and to get their hands on the enemy.
Okay.
So they are OSIT. They are one unit
Right.
one unit station training, whatever the acronym is. So basic training to AIT for those that go straight through, not like a lot of them where you graduate basic training and you go to a different post.
Yeah, that's what I did.
You stay right there in the same building with the same drill sergeants. The only difference is the date changes.
So how long was your basic and AIT?
I want to say combined together, it was like 16 or 18 weeks total.
Okay, well, that's not too entirely
No,
bad.
it wasn't too entirely bad, but like I said, it was all, you slept in the same bed with the same people, and nothing really changed until you got on into AIT.
Right.
Basic was, they changed the color of the flag out there, but back then, nothing else changed.
Right.
I think we
get
could start
that.
getting Gatorade at the DFAC instead of having to drink water.
Right. Nothing but water,
Nothing
right?
but
You couldn't
water.
have milk. So this is kind of funny. So, a lot of people, and I'm sure, there might be some people who never served in the military that are watching this, and I hope there are. Excuse me. They always ask, why do you eat so fast? Right?
That's all I know.
Look, let me, and you can vouch for me on this. So when you're in basic training, right, you've ate normal up till that point, right? Your mom and dad probably made sure you cleaned your plate or whatever. But there wasn't a time limit. You didn't have a certain time set forth. You had to be done.
Yeah.
And then in a formation, right? So, a drill sergeant comes in, or there's 2 or 3 or whatever, you're in the chow hall, and, you're all waiting, you got your plate, and the drill sergeant, I think we even said some kind of little cheesy or corny Army saying, something before we ate, and then we all sat down at the same exact time, and you had 2 minutes to eat, have your tray put up, and be back in formation outside. So when you do this, for me, it was 9 weeks, 9-week basic training, it becomes kind of habit,
Yeah.
right? So right now I'm 41, and I can hoover a plate of food, right? And it's not by choice. It's literally because I had to do it back when I was 18 years old, and it just stuck.
Yep.
And I've done it ever since. So that's why we eat fast. Did y'all have something similar?
And I still have the same problem very seldom, and am I not the first person at the table that's finished? Like, my grandpa still looks at me all the time whenever we have meals over there, and he goes, "Well, did you taste it, son?"
Yeah, right.
And I've always kind of made the joke, since
I'll taste it
then,
when I burp.
I don't need to taste it.
Right.
That ain't what it's for.
Yeah, that's right.
It's fuel, not comfort. It just, but I'm still the same way.
I got you. So when you were in training and then you actually go to AIT, were you guys training with any of the EOD bunch?
No, so when you think about the combat engineers, the EOD, we share, a few similarities.
Okay.
We are both demolition experts for what's being asked of us.
Okay.
We deal mostly with C4, deck cord, shock tube, Bangalores, just your basic items to blow obstacles
They
out
still
of the way.
have Bangalores? Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Really?
Still use Bangalores, where EOD is more of the, let me go investigate this explosive. Let me see if I can disarm it. Let me understand about it. That way I can try and figure out, hopefully, maybe who built it, things of that nature. So they look at more of the the other people's built explosive to try to disarm and learn about, whereas we build our own.
Got you.
You know, like Iraq, 2000, on one of my deployments, 2007, 2008, we were doing route clearance as an engineer unit. Got to go to a couple of schools where they allowed the engineer platoons that were out actually doing the clearance to, when we found IEDs, we could blow them ourselves.
Right.
So there were certain stipulations. If it was just a basic mortar round or, you know, artillery round that the enemy had set up with something to initiate it to make it go boom, we could get our robot out, drag C4 out there to it, put it on top of it, blast it, clear it, go on about our business.
Okay. So AIT, how long was your AIT? If your basic was, what, 9 weeks, and then your, you know, all total it was, what, 16 weeks? So what, 5-6 weeks AIT?
I want to say it was 5 weeks worth of solid, more or less training. And then, like everything else, when you go to those types of schools, you had a last week of clean up, refit,
right,
prepare to graduate, cleaning barracks and whatnot.
Okay, so you graduate AIT from Fort Leonard. Did your parents or anybody go up there to see you graduate?
Not AIT.
Okay.
My mom and my grandma come up and pick me up whenever I, quote unquote, finish basic training. And they had a small graduation ceremony.
Okay.
Then, but the only reason why is because it was the summer cycle where you had a lot of the split ops.
Right.
And you had kids who were leaving. So they had kind of a graduation ceremony. Outside of that time of year, it's wake up and you're in AIT for everybody else.
Oh, wow. All right, so you're done with your basic training and AIT. Walk me through your next steps.
So I pretty much knew before graduate, I knew when I left for AIT that when I got home, I was going to Iraq.
Oh, so you already knew?
I already knew. When that sergeant major called me and they pushed up my AIT date, and he told me he had some active duty for me, he told me I was going to Iraq.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, I pushed some buttons when, you know, my grandma made that call, and it got things rolling. And like I said, when he called me and told me that if I wanted to go active duty, he had some active duty for me. That was Iraq. So like I said, I knew when I left for AIT that when I got home, I was Iraq bound to catch up with the rest of the state.
Did that add a level of stress throughout AIT?
I was 18, full of you-know-what and vinegar, thinking I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And in my mind, I don't think I had the awareness to be scared yet.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know what I didn't know that I would have been scared of.
Right.
So, no, not really.
Okay. So you go home, I guess, you know, and walk me through. I mean, there's so much that goes on. So what's your mentality up until a point you deploy? How was, you know, your duty station? I know National Guard, but even still, you know, meeting with your unit, which is not even there, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through all the way up until you get deployed.
Once I graduate AIT, I never go back to my unit. I'm home for like a week or two, and the person who was over the unit, quote unquote, on Rear D, which was another E4 from Richton, Mississippi. I don't remember if you remember Jeremy Jackson.
Yeah.
He's George County police officer, works for the sheriff department now.
Yep. At
that time, he had just gotten back from going to Iraq with a previous unit from the state, and he got orders to be over custodial over the Loosedale unit, is just a person there to sit in the building to, you know, day-to-day stuff. Calls me and said, "Hey, I got your orders. Report to Camp Shelby on this date." And reported to Camp Shelby. There was a handful of us. I think there was somewhere around 40 or 50 replacements. We went through a modified shortened MOB and got all of our gear, got our shots, done the basic, you know, weapons qualifications, set through some of the little old short, you got to watch this class about cultures and customs, made sure all of our financial stuff was done. We had our wheels, which that was kind of an eye-opening thing for an 18-year-old kid, was creating a wheel. And
a wheel.
A wheel, yeah.
Okay, wow. All right.
That was part of the financial checklist and stuff. Was you had to have somebody as
That's right.
your
Yeah.
SGLI,
Yeah.
and if you had anything of value, you had to make a will and
Right.
all this good
And
stuff.
power of attorney and all this other stuff. Yeah, I
Yep.
remember that. I remember doing that. Yeah.
And, like I said, we done all the bare minimum things in a span of about 2.5 weeks.
And this is in June of 2005 or prior to.
This was prior to, so May. In middle of May is when we started, and then we wound up getting a 4-day pass at the end to go say bye to our family.
Okay.
And then by mid-June, we were on a bird.
Oh, wow. So you're a single man or young man at this point, right? I mean, you had a girlfriend or fiance?
So I had a girlfriend that I'd actually started dating after I got back from AIT, believe it or not. And crazy, but wonderful woman. I'm actually married to her today.
Come on.
And got, I've got 3 boys, and, we have our 2 together, and, life has a funny way of working out sometimes.
You're right about that. You're exactly right. So, go ahead and tell me a little bit about Celeste. Right, that's your wife now.
It is.
What was going through y'all's mind? So did she know that you were about to get deployed?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one of the very first things. Like, I knew that before me and her ever ran into each other and decided that we were going to be boyfriend and girlfriend, like we used to call it back then. So that was one of the first things that she knew, that I wasn't going to be around long, that I was going to Iraq. But it was just, I guess, one of them things where when you meet that person and everything just makes sense, that we both knew that it made sense, and she was willing to take, I hate to say take, but to make that sacrifice, to know that she's fixing to start dating somebody who's fixing to be gone for the next 6 to 8 months.
Right.
And there's a possibility that they may not come back at all.
Right. That, I talk about this a lot. There's a certain level of respect that most of us have for the spouse who stays home.
Yeah.
Right. Or the ones that get left behind. We as soldiers, or you as a Marine or a sailor, airman, or whatever, when you get deployed, we have that mentality of we're serving our country. We're off doing this great, honorable deed, right? Yeah. The ones who stay behind and take care and manage our families, our household, they are underrated. Not forgotten, don't get me wrong, but we never realized the amount of, for lack of a better word, crap that they had to hold together.
So we serve, they suffer.
Absolutely.
We serve, they suffer.
And just, I know for my wife, and for some reason, I've been thinking about this recently. When you're gone, right, and especially during the time that you and I were gone, this is one of the most hostile times in Iraq or Afghanistan. People at home understand, okay, all this bad stuff's happening over there. As a spouse, if my wife was going over there, every time the phone rang, I'd freak out. Every time I heard somebody pull into my driveway, I'd freak out. For some reason, here recently, I've been thinking about that, and then the level of stress that my wife had to deal with, your significant other, wife, whatever, or yours,
Yeah.
I mean, we did not give them the credit that they deserve.
My mama swears up and down she don't know how she didn't have a mental breakdown from her only kid that kept volunteering several times to go back
right.
over the course of about 8 years. She just didn't know. She said, I thought I was going to be the death of her.
And that's a huge reason why performance recognizes our veteran spouses. Yep. You're not the only one that served. You might have signed your name. You might have a DD-214, but in my opinion, I think the wife served just as much.
Oh, yeah.
Or the husband. Way more. Absolutely. Because Lord knows we did some really, really dumb stuff. Yeah, I can speak for you and I for sure. And knowing that our wives know nothing of it, unless, of course, you told yours. My wife knows bits and pieces of some of the stuff that I did and we did. But, there's some stuff that's just better left over there, right? So anyway, I'm off in the weeds over here. So you were saying you were on a plane headed over. What kind of plane did y'all fly on?
So whenever we got ready to fly out, there was actually a hurricane in the Gulf. And so we couldn't fly out of the airport down in Gulfport like most of y'all had done when y'all left.
Right.
So they put us on charter buses and took us all the way to the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. They bussed us all the way over there, and we wound up getting on, I couldn't tell you what kind of bird. It was a big one.
Right.
It was a big one. And so we took I think it was like a 16-hour trip from Camp Shelby, Mississippi to the Dallas-Fort Worth airport on a charter bus.
Oh, my goodness.
And from there we left. Left there, flew
Y'all
in.
on commercial airline?
So we were on the Army bird. So it was a commercial bird, but it was contracted through the Army.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a C-17.
That's what I was thinking, right.
It wasn't C-17. It was actually a commercial airline where the only people that was on it was military. But like when you come home from leave or when you redeployed back, same bird.
I got you. I think back every time I walk inside of my boss's office. So Torrey Garrison, the vice president of EH&S, he's my boss here with Performance. Every time I walk into his office in Mobile, so he's got this mural on his wall, and it's of a bunch of people wearing the digital ACU camouflage uniform. So I know what era it's from, and I think all their patches actually it's the big red 1 patch, right? So they're on a C-17, and he's got it's a picture of somebody standing up, probably from the cockpit of this plane, with all these troops on
seated.
Right, man. Every time I go in there, I almost have a flashback. I get to the point to where I'll just reminisce that flight, right? And for me, it's kind of like I can compare it to the trip to basic training. What have I gotten myself into?
What
what
does
have I
the other
done?
end of this look like?
Right. And what was your mindset on that flight? I mean, had you had any regrets up to this point?
I think nerves finally started settling in.
Okay.
This ain't Kansas no more, Toto.
Right. You start clapping your shoes 3 times. I mean, you're trying to get home.
Start okay, and we've gotten to the point where now this is real.
Yeah.
This is serious. I'm not in danger yet, but I'm headed that way quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Right.
And we flew over, stopped like everybody else in Germany, got more food and fuel, and then landed, in Kuwait. And I will never forget walking off that bird for the first time in Kuwait.
That was at Camp Arif John, right?
So you wind up landing at, if I'm not mistaken, Kuwaiti International Airport. No, you're right. It is at AJ.
Okay.
And I flew out on emergency leave. I flew out of KIA. But you land and you step off that bird, and it is someone who has a hairdryer in their hand, blowing it as hot as it can go right in your face while they throw sand up. Like it is. What the heck is this place? Is this hell?
Yeah.
Like, did we land in hell? Am I sure I'm in the right place?
Right. You don't experience that heat.
And this is at 2:00 in the morning. Like, it is pitch black outside. The only lights you see are from the airfield and the street lights.
Right.
And it is hot, and it is sandy, and it is just like something we don't have over here. We have Mississippi hot, Louisiana hot.
Right.
We have Southern hot. And it's not like one is hotter than the other, but it's something like you ain't never felt.
That's right.
It's just a dry, hot, nasty heat.
Yeah. So you're in Kuwait. How long did you have to stay in Kuwait before you convoyed into?
So we didn't convoy in because we come up as replacements. Y'all were already in station where y'all were at. We were there about 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
And we wound up hopping on Black Hawks. No, actually, we got on a C-17 from Kuwait, and we flew to Balad.
Really?
Yep. So they flew us from Kuwait to Balad. Balad? No, it's Baghdad. They flew us into Baghdad into the green zone.
Okay.
And then from there, we were there for like a day or so, And from there, we took Black Hawks to our different respected FOBs
Right.
and then the AO. Everybody within that unit, that group that didn't, mob to go with us to that one place, started going to their different units of assignment, depending on who they were, where they came from, or whether they were just a replacement to go get stuck wherever they felt like they were needed.
All right. So on that chopper ride, you're aware at this point that you're going into the war zone, correct?
Oh, yeah.
What's your mentality at this point? Is it the same as it was, coming over the pond, or
Nervous,
has it?
but too stupid to be scared. Like antsy, nervous, but just, I don't know. I say too stupid to be scared. I didn't fear anything.
Do you think you were overly confident, or?
I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what I needed to fear and what I didn't fear. I didn't know what was, could kill me and what to expect. So I just,
Right.
like, okay, so I could die here, but how am I going to die? Like, what am I to be scared of?
So this is during the time the movie We Were Soldiers had come out about Vietnam.
Yeah.
I know on the flight over, I downloaded the movie, or I'd had the DVD or something, and I watched We Were Soldiers probably 3 times on that flight. But in increments, I was reading the book Halo, Master Chief and everything. That's during that time Halo was where it was at. I had this idea that once we got off this plane, it was going to be the same scenario
As I drank.
Yes, sir. So I'm freaking out at a high level.
You got to remember, right? So I'm coming in late.
Mm-hmm.
I've already got friends that are there.
So you know what's going on.
So I know that the biggest threat right now is IEDs.
Okay.
And I know that there ain't no IEDs in the air. Now, the first time I roll out the gate, that's a different story.
Right.
But as far as the getting there and the helicopter ride and getting on the base, like I said, I didn't really know of anything to be scared of. Nervous as hell, yes.
Right.
But like I said, I knew that IEDs were what had hurt and killed the people that we'd lost so far. And they wasn't none of them in the air, and they wasn't none of them, hopefully, in the fob. Little did I know the second I got off the bird that we was going to get mortared. Yeah. That was eye-opening. Yeah. Like literally grabbing my bags off the Black Hawk, walking across the helo pad at Cal Sioux. Mm-hmm. I ain't even signed in yet or said hey to nobody, and the alarm goes off.
Yeah.
That was welcome here.
Right. And little did you know
that was going to happen
3 to 5 times a week
throughout the rest of the time we were there.
It became a norm, you know. It was a thing that you learned to deal with, right? Yeah. I'm telling you, dude. Later on in life, you look back and you're like, we were just walking around, which General Collins during this time, I think, we were in full battle rattle.
Having to walk 4th is when it changed.
Right.
Yep.
We had to walk around with Kevlar, IBA. I mean, you were ready to roll, and this was due to the amount of rocket fire and mortar fire that FOB Cal Sioux received.
And the only place you could take it off was either in the downstairs bunker in the chow hall or in your tent.
That's right. That's right. I'm gonna give it back to you, but so. I remember where your tent was, which, of course, in orientation to where mine was. You actually get there, okay? We're under a mortar attack.
Yep.
What was it like going to your tent and meeting your fellow soldiers?
So I actually wound up with most of the replacements that I had trained up with. We all kind of wound up staying together.
Okay.
So I didn't actually wind up going to my unit of assignment.
Really?
Yep. They wound up holding a bunch of us replacements together and backfilling us into 98 Cav, which was one of the units from the brigade that's, no longer there. It's been stood down at this point. I think it got stood down not long after we got back, and there was some reorganization stuff that happened.
Okay.
And we wound up backfilling their platoons because of how short they were. So that's why whenever you used to come over, You know, that was a bunch of guys that met during.
No kid. I didn't know that. I thought that was actually a unit.
Well, we were in a unit, but we weren't of that unit, you know, organically.
So you weren't in the Loosedale unit right there.
I wasn't. The Loosedale unit was at Fob Dogwood. Those guys were at Dogwood.
That's right. Yeah, we had what? Calsu, Dogwood, and
Escandaria, and then TQ, Duke.
Yeah, that was up north, right at the border.
And there was Fob Duke, and then there was a handful of them.
I mean, you're talking so just, you know, kind of telling everybody about the 155th, you know, in the state of Mississippi, you can describe this unit by saying brigade.
Yeah, we are the brigade.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knew brigade. Yeah. And though I've been out for so long, you know, our patch, our name is Dixie Thunder. That's the name of our patch. And I say our patch like it's still mine, but it is in heart. I might as well have old Dixie Thunder tattooed on my heart because I mean that's something to be proud of. Like, I mean, there's the amount of pride that I have for being able to serve my country and wear that patch. I mean, it does something to me. But you can go and talk to anybody who serves in the National Guard, and when you mention the word brigade, they automatically know who you're talking about, and they're either going to love you or they're going to hate you.
Yep, that's one of the two.
There is no mediocre fine line riding between. You're either loved or you're hated. Yep. But I'm good with it. So you're with your unit. What was your mission?
So being replacements and backfilling a unit that was short, we got tasked out and treated like redheaded stepchildren. No offense.
No, I got you.
But we got tasked out with every little thing that you could think of. We'd done a combination of falling in on patrols, falling in on, guard duty, falling in on pretty much anything they were short of and needed bodies for. So we just got handed around, got thrown into the rotation with the rest of that cavalry troop, and just got a little mix of everything. Yeah. So we've done everything from gate guard to vehicle search to going out to Haswa on patrol to being part of the General Collins's PSD.
Right.
Just whatever come about that they needed, bodies for, we got pulled to the four winds.
Sure. So during your time there, I see you've actually brought some stuff. I'd like for you to go ahead and show me what it is that you brought. Go ahead and tell a story that lies behind it.
All right, so, you asked to bring, something that held some sentimental value, and, I was going through my stuff, and I'm not going to say I'm a hoarder, but I have a tendency to keep certain things, especially when it comes to military stuff. So I brought, I couldn't decide on one, so I brought a couple of things.
There you go.
One is your IET Soldier's Handbook. That's what they call the Soldier's Bible when you go to basic training. That is your welcome to the military. Here's the basics of what you need to learn at AIT, the basics of being a soldier. I brought actually one of the uniform tops that I wore on my first deployment in Iraq. That was the DCUs that, you and myself and everybody else that went in 05 with the brigade, that's what we wore. If you flip it up, it's actually got the Dixie Thunder patch on both sides of it, one being, my unit of assignment.
That's right. So just in case anybody wondering, that's the Dixie Thunder patch.
Yep. That one being my unit of assignment. And then on the other slide, it also being my unit of combat affiliation, which means that is the unit that, I went to combat with, otherwise kind of known as a combat patch.
Right. So how many combat patches do you have? Now, I know you've been back several times more. How many do you have?
I don't know.
Really?
I really don't know, Michael. I've got one that I wear, and I've got probably 7 or 8 memorandums for different ones within my iPerms, but I've never worn anything other than the 11th ACR combat patch. That was actually who we, yourself and myself wind up getting attached to, which was a armored cavalry regiment from Fort Irwin. And it's not a very common patch.
No, it's not.
The 2nd 11th ACR is a training battalion.
Right. They usually perform OP4
They
duties
do
during that
OP4,
national
so
training.
that's other than folks that went during the first Gulf War. That is a not very common patch. I'm proud to have that one.
Absolutely.
I have been wearing that on my uniform since 2006. Whenever we got back, and I was able to find some and get them sewed on or Velcroed at the time with the new uniforms. But I've probably got, if I had to estimate, like I said, 7 or 8 different ones that I'm authorized.
Oh wow! How many did we get from our first deployment?
So, from what I remember, I know we got the 155. There were some of us that got the 11th ACR.
Yeah.
There was the first MEF, who owned the battle space whenever we first went in. They ripped with second MEF, which means we also got that one. And then I want to say, I'm almost positive, I've got something that covers 18th Airborne Corps too, because they were the corps that had responsibility over the battle space that we were in. So they were our higher corps headquarters.
So were we the first, and I've heard rumors of this, so this is a legitimate question that I have. Were we the first unit to ever wear a Marine division patch?
If I'm not mistaken, that patch was designed for us to be able to wear.
Right.
Like, I don't think...
Like, I think the Marine Corps had to approve, you Army guys
because
can
there was so many of us that they were responsible for within their battle space, and the fact that we wear combat patches and they don't.
Right.
They more or less designed, approved it, and it was awarded to us.
Do you know do they still award it even today?
I don't think so.
Really?
Most of the time, if you see somebody with a second MEF, which is the pretty common one, if you see somebody with a second MEF combat patch, that's early Iraq.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So what else did you bring?
So we got that. I brought this in. Let me scoot this out of the way. I kind of found this when I was going through one of my tough boxes, my green boxes. And so throughout my deployments, you always had to have certain things in your uniform.
Right.
Whether it be your driver's license, your shot records, this form, that form, this piece of documentation. And this is the stack that I wound up more or less accumulating over 4 combat deployments, over the years. I flipped through here earlier, and there's things like early on in my career, here's a 4187 that's a battlefield promotion from specialist to corporal.
Okay.
So
just kind of reach up and just
I went
show
from
everybody.
Just a basic rifleman to being an E4 corporal team leader.
Okay.
Those first set of stripes that you can earn right below sergeant.
Right.
Just some accident avoidance stuff, and then of course this one kind of hit me. So we had to do casualty feeder cards. So casualty feeder cards is where you took this piece of paper right here, and the only thing that you filled out was your permanent information, social security number, stuff at the top, and you carried it on your person. And if something happened to you, you were wounded, injured, whatever it was, they would grab that document out of your shoulder, fill it out, show the location of wound, injury, and all the rest of this stuff. And then it would go with you to wherever they medevaced you to, so that they knew your name in case they had to cut your uniform off for whatever reason. And it was pretty much just saying, okay, if I get injured, here's who I am. So filling that out was kind of an eye-opening thing for me.
Oh, sure.
And then just some other random stuff, smart cards. There was some driver's license in here. Shot record, You hear veterans.
Yeah, we actually talked about that earlier.
You hear veterans talking all the time about, all the shots that we got, in the military. And
right before your deployment.
Right before your deployment. And if you want to hold that up.
Oh, yeah.
That is a...
Now, let me go into detail as to how this works out. So if you can see this, there's a number of shots right there. Just kind of going through some of them. Twin Ricks, I have no idea what that is. Nobody, the Army probably doesn't even know what that is. Hep B, MMR, IPV, TD flu, MGC, Hep A, typhoid, PPD, smallpox. Everybody loves that little wet bubble. Anthrax. anthrax. That's the reason I have short-term memory loss. But normally what's happening is you're standing in a hallway, or from my experience, you're standing in a hallway. There's a long line. It's usually stretched out across whatever street there is, because there's hundreds of people that are waiting to get their shots. And you walk in through this door, and it's this long corridor, and there's intervals of people, right? You step forward, somebody sticks you here. You step forward, somebody sticks you here.
And you get to the end of the line, you hand them your card, and they fill it all out.
That's right.
Hand it back to you, you stick it in your pocket.
That's it. That's this card.
Yep.
Right. So what else you got?
The last thing I brought.
Oh, I've been dying to see whatever this is.
That hung on the door of my tent. Do you see anybody's name on there you recognize?
Sure enough. I remember signing that.
Yep. So since we were a blackout fob, we had a wooden outline, or I guess for lack of a better term, like a mud room, because being blackout, you couldn't just open the tent at night because you remember light would get out. And the last thing they wanted was light getting out. So you had a little mud room where you would walk in, close the door, and then you could enter the tent. Well, on the outside of those outer wooden doors, you had a tent number, tent placard, so that everybody knew what tent was what, Alpha 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever.
Right.
And I managed to get my hands on that and took it off as we were getting ready to leave, and got a handful of the guys that was there with us to put their John Hancock on it. And I have had it ever since.
Wow. Somebody put "It Wasn't Me."
That's when, so Shaggy, that song "It Wasn't Me" had just come out and was real popular.
Right.
About that time.
We were talking about a guy earlier that I couldn't remember his name. I think that's his name on here, Specialist Jordan.
Are you talking about Grant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the guy that you and I were talking about. So there's a story. You mind if I tell this story?
Go ahead.
I have told this story, I guarantee you, 1,000 times. So during the time that Daniel and I were over there together, there's a lot of times you're on mission. You come back and you've got to have some kind of stress reliever, some kind of just way to vent, cool down, whatever the case may be. Once Daniel got there, which you came like 4 or 5 months after we arrived, right? And then you and, like you said previously, you and I might have met in like a chow hall or something like that, and realized that we knew the same people, and from generally the same area. So we just kind of naturally kicked it off, right? And we would hang out together. Back then, the internet was nothing compared to what it is today. Yeah. And it was still in the growing phases. We would, do crazy stuff on a computer and just hang out. Like I said, it was our period to where we were able to cool down. Well, Daniel and I had gotten into this, which at this point you were a private, I was a specialist. It was okay for us to what the military calls fraternize, right? And people think that means flirt and everything else. But if you're a higher-ranking NCO or commission guy, you can't really be buddy-buddy with the lower-ranking individuals because that's fraternization, right?
It shows favoritism to,
that's right.
To someone.
So with me being still enlisted, an E4, not an NCO, and you being a private, that's not necessarily fraternization.
That's just two Joes.
That's right. That's exactly right. So we would hang out and, just bull crap, whatever, get on the internet and do crazy crap. So at some point we decided to take it up a notch. We were going to start working out. We were going to get big. Well, Daniel found a shortcut.
Daniel's good at those sometimes.
Yep. And for those of you who don't understand exactly what I'm talking about, I say we. It wasn't we. It was you.
It was me.
So Daniel couldn't give himself a shot. He asked me to give him a shot of this cheating stuff, right? So
let's look at it this way, right? So this is 2024, and today it's called TRT and HRT.
Okay.
And it is very accepted. You know, it wasn't anabolic steroids.
It's not like you were taking
I
Deca
wasn't taking, you know, it was testosterone.
Right.
Now, was I a dumb young kid that probably didn't need it back then? No. But it was the same thing that most people, you know as HRT or TRT today, and it is accepted, and it's, you know, nothing crazy. It wasn't like I was trying to go out there and be a professional bodybuilder. And
Right.
But I found something, like you said, a little boost. I was a little guy.
You outgrew me. I don't know if you outgrew me. So
you know, I was 18.
Right.
I was 155 pounds. I was about as big around as my little finger, and I wanted to be bigger.
Right.
I wanted to be intimidating. I wanted to be a person of stature that if somebody looked at me, whether I had a gun in my hand or not, out on patrol, the first thing that went through their mind, whether they spoke English or not, was I don't want to with that guy.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like that's a dude I don't want to mess with, regardless if he had a gun or not. And so I struck out with a mission and a purpose.
So, going back to the story, now that you've set the tone, Daniel gets this. In my mind, I remember it being in a case, and like you said, you might have put it in a case. But I remember you showing me this case and be like, Favre, look what I got, right? So I'm like, what is that? And you're like, well, that's steroids. And I'm like, what are you doing with that? He's like, we fix to get big. I'm like, you fixing to get big? I'm not taking that crap. He's like, well, look, I need you to do me a favor. Okay, what's that? He said, I need you to give it to me. I'm like, okay. So as you walk into this tent, now this tent's not like a tent like you're camping in, right? No. This tent's probably 40 yards. 40.
It was a GP large. So
20 yards. What do you think?
Yeah, I want to say it was 20 yards wide or 20 yards long by
10 wide, maybe.
Probably 15 or 30 long by 15 wide.
Okay,
it was fairly decent. There was 40 of us that lived in there.
Yeah, right. So you walk through the front of this tent. You were the first bunk on the left, correct?
Yep. Very first bunk when you walked in on the left.
So y'all actually had bunks.
Yep, we had bunk beds.
Nobody
slept on the top. We lived in a spot where we tended to get mortars within our block fairly often.
Right.
So with having bunk beds, believe it or not, most of us had Kevlar mats on the top bunks as just a precaution so that we didn't catch shrapnel in our sleep.
Right. I got you. Okay. I didn't know that. We were on cots. Yep. I mean, and it was.
To be honest with you, as small as those bed rails were, and as thin as those mattresses were,
it wasn't. Yeah.
I'd have rather been on a cot.
Yeah. I mean, it's
they
really
were little old.
It's going to add more shrapnel, if anything.
They were little old Haji bunk beds. They were cheap, but they were what we were given and what we made do with.
And we don't mean any disrespect when we say Haji. That's just how back then that was the lingo. I mean, that's what we called the local nationals that were over there.
You know, I say Haji, and I'm glad you said that. You know, being as a matured individual and having some sense about me to go, you know, educate myself. You know, we all back then tended to use the term Haji as a derogatory thing.
Right.
When in reality, it is a term of great endearment when you speak to someone and they are actually Haji. Haji stands for a Muslim who actually made the trip to Mecca. And that is like a once-in-a-lifetime ordeal for most Muslims, is to travel by foot wherever they're from to the city of Mecca on their pilgrimage, more or less. So, and a person who has made that trip to Mecca is considered a Haji. Like, it is actually a term of endearment and a very respectful thing if someone has made that trip and you know, they are a Haji.
Wow, that's news to me. I
Yep.
didn't know anything about that. Huh. All right, so, well, I appreciate the education, the history lesson there, because I like I said, I didn't know that. So as you walked into the tent, you were the first bunk on the left-hand side, and we had just had this conversation about me giving you a shot. So now this tent's full of people, right? There's people all in this tent, and we decide that we're going to hang the OD green wool blanket around the bunk. It might have been a couple of them because, I mean, you couldn't.
They were already hung. We had.
That's right. You did have them already hung.
We had sections bunked off for privacy. You
That's
had
right.
your own little hut within the tent.
Right.
Just, you know, for privacy.
Well, so the conversation begins on how to implement the steroids. So I was a CLS. I was a combat lifesaver. So yeah, I could give a shot. I could, take blood. God bless his soul. I wish Greg Daly could hear this because that's another story for another time. And plus, I'm trying to stay dry-eyed. So, you and I actually started discussing how I was going to apply the shot. And mind you, I'll say once again, there's plenty of people in this tent. So I'm like, I think you put it together, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, you want me to stick this thing in you? And he said, you were like, yeah. I'm like, all of it? And you said, yeah, you got to hub it out. Mind you, nobody can see what's going on, but everybody out there apparently could hear what was going on. So I take this thing, and I said, it was something to the nature like, are you ready? And you was like, yeah, come on, give it to me. So I hub it out, right in the butt cheek. And you like, something to that nature, right? Well, right as I'm injecting him with the syringe and the needle, right, to apply the steroids, the blanket comes down. There's like 15 people standing around the bunk, and they're all like, what is going on? What are y'all doing? There I am, you standing there with your pants half down to your knees, me standing catty cornered at an angle with my hand attached to your butt, applying steroids. That story, again, if I had $1 for every time I've told somebody that story, not necessarily using your name, which it's out there now, my friend, I probably could retire. That is how very well I remember that time period, that incident, and really and truly how much I hold the friendship that you and I had back then dear to me. It means the world. It really does.
And, this is back, don't ask, don't tell time frame.
Right. And that's what everybody outside of that OD green wool blanket was thinking, but it was 100% heterosexual, me giving you a shot of
testosterone
vinegar or, whatever. So now back to what we were talking about. During our deployment while we were over there, I know I had a lot of different missions that I went on. I did a lot of different things. What were some of the coolest things that you got to experience while you were over there?
To be honest, there's only a few things that I really remember about that first deployment. And I don't say that, I don't want to put it, that it wasn't important. But I've got so much time over there at this point that there's certain things that I can remember specifically per employment, a lot of times just based on like the location of where it happened. But so much of it blends together. I have a hard time keeping it separated.
Right.
Especially my 3 to Iraq. Afghanistan was its own individual animal.
Right.
But there's still things that, okay, was that in Iraq or was that in Afghanistan?
Right.
I have such a hard time keeping them, separated. Like I said, we've done everything from gate guard. At 18 years old, I got into my very first firefight. You can see there on my uniform, I've got a combat action badge. That's, one of those things that is awarded to individual that sees direct combat with the enemy. 18 years old, and anybody ever tells you they got into a gunfight and they weren't scared, they're lying.
Yeah.
It was one of them things where I grabbed a hold of the trigger on the saw, and I just let her eat till it went clunk.
Yeah.
Wasn't no big bad dude. Didn't even know if I could do it at the time, but I figured out that I could do it. Online, several deployments in, I figured out that I was really good at it.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that stepping stone, that learning moment was that first time. Enjoyed playing ping pong. It's where I learned how to play ping pong. Me and you played a lot of ping pong.
That's right.
That's one of the the big things I remember about that first deployment. As far as the good things, was playing a lot of ping pong at the MWR.
Yeah.
Outside of that, there's a few other things we won't talk about that was, good things that, 18, 20, 21-year-old guys are doing that ain't necessarily bad, but it's combat zone. We could die any day. Why not live while we can?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
nothing drastic, but just little things. I can remember drinking too much alcohol on occasion. Who cares at this point? But you know,
Wait a minute. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
All we had was O'Doul's.
Yeah.
Near beer, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, like I said, stuff like that.
I won't tell anybody the story of how I got this tattoo.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So during all of your deployments, so how many did you make?
So when it was all said and done with, I wound up with 3 deployments to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. And then for about 11 months, chunk of my career in there, I wound up going to Israel as a private contractor with the State Department.
Okay. All right. So I guess of all your tours and even your voluntary tour, give me a few moments that really stood out. That you can talk about, of course.
All right, so Iraq, 1st one. I'm glad you brought that up. That one of the things that I tell people all the time about my first deployment, you know, is within like 3 days of getting there, I'm on guard duty. And I'm sitting there watching this side of Christie that runs out by the gate. We've got our binoculars. And this car stops. And this woman gets out of the car and she walks down the hill, down the side of a little berm, and walks around behind a bush. So she can't be seen from the road, but she's on this side of the bush to where I'm looking right at her. She hocks up her skirt, takes a number 2, walks back up the hill, gets back in the car, and drives off like it's nothing. And I'm going, this definitely ain't Kansas no more, Toto. Like this is nothing like I have ever experienced. This is almost still not necessarily barbaric, but still very
Third world country.
Third world was to watch a woman take a dump and wipe her butt with a rock.
Wow.
Let's see what else. My second deployment. So my second deployment was not long after. We had this little village right outside of the fob that I lived on that we pretty much drove through every time we left.
Right.
And our FRG had sent us a bunch of basketballs and presents and whatnot during Christmas time. And so a bunch of us got together and we decided that whenever we went out on this patrol this next time, we were going to take it out there and we're going to give it to all these kids that always gathered around, Pepsi, chocolate, Mr. It's just with the kids, a little bit of English, they knew how to ask for drinks, candy bars, right?
Right.
So there was this one little girl that everybody knew. And I don't say this being ugly, but she was about as cross-eyed as it gets.
Oh, come on.
And she was otherwise known as Cross-Eyed Mary. We all assumed, because the unit that we ripped out with that was there before us told us, hey, that's Cross-Eyed Mary. We assumed that was just the nickname that she had been given by people who had seen her, and everybody knew who Cross-Eyed Mary was.
Okay.
So we stopped giving out all these gifts and whatnot, and she comes running up to me, and in just the clearest English you have ever heard, hey, I'm Mary, how are you? I jumped back and I said, holy.
Yeah.
I don't know if somebody told her her name was Mary or if Mary was actually her name, but that was like okay. And she thanked us. We give them some gifts and whatnot, and wound up being the sweetest, little girl you have ever met in your life, to the point where it makes you feel bad that they have to be in a country that is just in those conditions, to where there's so much going on with the war and the terror,
right,
and more or less living under martial law of another government.
Yeah.
Just horrible that they have to, experience that.
Yeah. You're exactly right.
What else? Most of the good things that I really remember, believe it or not, have to do with the kids.
Yeah.
I have a very soft spot for little kids.
Sure.
They've never done anything to anybody. They don't deserve the conditions they're in most of the time. And I've got some pictures of, playing baseball with little kids in Afghanistan with a rock.
Right.
And just, little things like that. That's probably some of the better memories of some of those deployments that, really stick that I think about sometimes.
So, what for those who are listening and watching, and this is something that is going to be educational only. So, bear with me when I ask this question. When you're in a combat zone and you're given a mission, and you and I both have done this, and it's been routine up to this point. You go out on mission, whether it be a raid or whether it be going to a checkpoint, whatever the case may be. Your first time where you're actually in combat, what's your mentality? I mean, are you deathly afraid? Are you confident? Or are you, I mean, just hunkered down? What's going through your mind in this moment?
So my very first time with that was our first deployment in '05.
Mm-hmm.
I got into a fairly good engagement, myself on a saw and what other individual with an M4. And as terrified as I was, I still had the wits about me to accurately engage targets.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I squeezed the trigger, I held it. As scared as I was, I still had the wits about me to, maintain sight picture, to accurately engage. I was more scared afterwards. Like, after the adrenaline wore off and coming back down from that to fully grasping the fact of what the possible outcome could have been of that was when I got scared. Like, the nerves finally hit of, okay, I made it through that, but this is what could have happened had I not been the better one or the luckier one. Because sometimes it ain't always about being better in some of those things. Sometimes it's about a little bit of luck and, whoever you believe in your higher power helping you out a little bit too at times.
That's right.
And, after that, I realized that, okay, doing that and firing your weapon at other people is something that I don't necessarily want to do, but it's something that I am very capable of doing.
When authorized to do so.
I've always told people, and especially younger soldiers as I, moved up and matured, you hear young soldiers getting ready, like, into my third deployment, getting ready for my fourth deployment, about how they just want to go, kill some Iraqis or Afghanis, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, hey, come here. Let's have a discussion here. I'm like, have you ever killed anybody? And they're like, no, sir. I'm like, then why do you think you want to go kill somebody? Well, they're the enemy, sir. I'm like, yeah, but they're also somebody's husband.
Yeah,
somebody's son.
Yep.
Somebody's father, somebody's brother. And doing what you have to do to defend yourself and your brothers being, us at any given time from someone with hostile intent, that's one thing. I was like, but when you kill someone, that's something you can't never take back.
That's a fact.
You can't bring them back, and you'll never be able to get that piece of yourself back that you just lost.
How long do you think that stays with you?
I think it honestly depends on the situation and whether or not you feel justified in what you had to do. I think that's where a lot of that acceptance plays into it. I have never pulled the trigger and never had to do anything that I am not 100% justified in what I did. And it has never, I had some instance with the very first one until I learned that what acceptance was and the fact that
you're exactly right.
The fact that I accepted it strictly because there were some things that happened within it, but that I was completely justified. Like, there was nothing I done that was wrong, and that if I hadn't, it's liable to have been me or somebody else that wore the same uniform as me. And once I accepted that and I learned that, I have never missed a wink of sleep. It's never bothered me. Never. And I've had more than a few occasions where I've had to do that, throughout my several deployments. It's pretty bad days, and never bothered me. I get more bothered bothered about some of the times that I didn't.
Right.
That maybe I felt like I should have.
Right. Right.
Yeah. That bothers me more at times than the times I did.
You know, and I mean, we're getting into a serious portion of the podcast at this point, of course, and I want to stress to those who are listening and who are watching that this is strictly educational. This is not for us to glorify the taking of life.
No.
This is strictly for you to understand what the human mind and body goes through in an exchange of such an occasion, right? For those who have been in combat, even some of those who haven't, it's not normal. It's not a normal feeling, but you are normal because this is how the body and the mind react, right? I mean, do you feel the same way?
I do. You know, they say war's not the hard part. Coming home is.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and, you know, we jumped a little bit in there. So, you know, in between deployments, you know, and I kind of talked about earlier how I kind of got roped into being a combat engineer. That's something I probably never would have picked of my own, you know, choice. I reclassed. Once I learned that, you know, I could change MOSs. So I come home from my first deployment. I get lucky enough that there is active duty orders where I'm still in the Guard, but I'm on active duty getting paid on the 1st and the 15th, just like regular Army at Camp Shelby, as an individual who has just returned from combat called OWT, Operation Warrior Trainer.
Okay.
Where they take those individuals who have fresh experience of combat and they apply that to the units that are coming through, mobilizing, getting ready to go over.
Right.
So I do that for a year and a half.
Okay.
You know, I'm fresh. I've got understanding. So we take part in training the units coming through, living at Camp Shelby. My time kind of comes up for the end of that, and I volunteer to deploy to go on a second deployment. I go over. That's when I'm doing route clearance, still an engineer. Come home, and I'm like, okay, that is enough of that. I don't like doing that. There's nothing fun about that. So I reclassed to what I would have chosen originally. And I went and reclassed to a 11 Bravo.
Okay.
I went and become an infantryman. So I'm, you know, 3.5, 4 years into my career at this point, and I go reclass to be an 11 Bravo. So my 3rd and 4th deployments were as an infantryman. You know, I'm out day in, day out. I am doing dismounted patrols. I'm doing mounted patrols. I am out, you know, doing raids, looking for different things. And I am, for lack of a better term, you know, they always say special forces is the tip of the spear. Well, I like to think of myself as the piece just below that. You know, we're what the Army is more or less striving to get into the fight.
Right.
You know, I didn't know it then, but as I've matured, grew up in rank, spent a lot more time in the infantry. You know, you always hear about infantry, pogues, combat, all the rest of this stuff. Well, there is one major goal that the Army has. And everybody who's not infantry, for lack of a better term, has one goal. And that is to get the infantry to within fighting distance of the enemy. So being a maintenance guy, being a supply guy, you may have a job, but the goal of your job is to do everything that it is required to get infantry within that last 100 yards, to get us the things we need, to provide the support that we need to be able to get us to that close fight with the enemy. It's the American way of fighting. That's what Pentagon says. It's what everything we do is to get that infantry squad to within that last 100 meters, because that's where we are the most dangerous, and they say that we're going to win.
Right.
You know, you look at some of the other nations out there, the way they try to defeat us is to try to keep us from getting close.
Right.
Because they know they can't win that fight. So, you know, we were talking about that mindset. So those last 2 deployments were completely different because of the things that I was out there doing on a daily basis.
Right.
And it can be hard. The coming home part's hard. The living your life on such a teeter-totter always looking for a threat, always being keyed up, always being hyper vigilant, because the war we fought was asymmetrical. The enemy didn't wear a uniform.
Right.
You didn't know where they were at. You didn't know who they were. That threat could come from anybody at any given time, to include Iraqi police officers and Afghanistan police officers and Army within your own fob that you are training and working with.
Yep.
So you spend so much time keyed up, hyper vigilant, looking for a threat, that when you come home, you don't know how to turn it off. You do not know how to turn it off. There is no magical button that says, okay, I'm home now. I can stop doing that.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. And that's where a lot of us have a really hard time, is turning that off and going back, in which we never will, to that person we were before. That person's gone. We just do our best to learn how to cope with the person that we have now become, and try to reintegrate that person back into the life that we had, if that makes sense.
You hit the nail on the head.
You know, because that person that we were before we ever left, they're gone. That person won't never come back. But that new person, we spend years trying to figure out how to reintegrate back into our life that didn't change for everybody else but us.
Right.
Everybody else is still the same people they were. We're not. And we try to figure out how to work that person back into that life and have some type of fulfillment, and slowly work that always hypervigilant, always worried, always stressed out, that loss of purpose at times.
Oh, yeah.
You spend a lot of time over there. You have a purpose. You have an objective. You have, a mission. When you come home, you don't have that anymore. You're kind of lost. And it can be hard to find it. To replace that in your life, to have that driving force. Like, it can be really hard to find something to take place of, what you had, as far as what got you up, what you knew you were doing day to day, what gave you satisfaction in a job well done. Not having your brothers around you.
Right.
That's one of the hard things. And you can come back, and you may go to a job where you have your brothers, go to work for performance. And yeah, you do have a sense of brotherhood in that career. But for us coming home and stepping away from our brothers in uniform, we're stepping away from a group of individuals who we understand and understands us based on the shared suffering of how it was.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And, me and you've kind of talked about this a few times, just me and you being able to talk. And I understand exactly what you went through. Our experiences may have been a little different, but I understand. And you know that I understand, and you
That's
can have
right.
comfort in telling me something.
Sure.
Because I know.
That's right.
It's just that shared bond.
Right.
And it can be hard to find that whenever you step away from the military.
Right.
Unless you've got some, other veterans at where your place of employment is.
Right.
I know performance is, veteran riddled.
Right.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Especially for those guys who think that they don't have anybody that they can talk to. Regardless of when you deployed, regardless of how bad or how minor your deployment was, you changed. And this is for all of them too. You changed. And there are people who may have, like I said, different experiences, but it's still the same. We understand.
That's right.
So don't ever feel like you're alone.
That's the biggest thing.
Don't feel like you're alone, and don't ever feel ashamed for having to talk to somebody. I see people all the time, and you hear people over exaggerate their war stories. Like, you hear that a lot, and I honestly think it's because those people feel guilty. that maybe they don't think that they done enough or that their service wasn't justifiable. And it also gets to those people who are afraid to talk because maybe they don't feel like their service was that bad that they should need to talk to somebody.
Right.
No. It affects everybody different.
That's right.
You know, whether you were out there and lost 8 buddies or you got mortared once or twice, you still spent a portion of your life being hyper vigilant, being possibly worried about your safety, your family being worried about your safety. And that right there within itself, is a form of PTSD. I mean,
absolutely.
You can almost equate it to people who spend, a year in a maximum security jail.
Right.
Every time you turn around, you're at risk, and you never know where that risk is coming from. It's the same thing for us over there in the way, our war was. A lot of times you're always at risk, and you never know where it's coming from.
Right,
and
exactly.
You can never let your guard down.
Right.
And that letting of the
guard. You
guard.
can't turn that off.
You can't turn that off. That switch doesn't turn off. So regardless of how bad your deployment was, your situation was, you still had that part of you that was always on, that it has affected and changed the person you are.
Right.
And there is nothing to ever be ashamed about.
That's exactly right.
Talking to someone, asking for help, whatever it may be. You're not alone.
The reaction, that's like what I was saying earlier, the reaction to what you've been through is completely normal. That's the body's way of reacting to that.
It's self-preservation.
And it's not made for you to deal with alone.
Nope.
For 2 years, I dealt with myself by myself, and I mean, it almost cost me my job. It almost cost me my family. I mean, when you experience something like this in your life, because we're soldiers or we're Marines or we're sailors or airmen or Coast Guard. I mean, we are the toughest of the tough,
yep.
Right? I don't need.
At least we think we have to be.
Well, right. The mentality in that transitional period is I don't need you, right? I don't need help. I got this.
I got
and that's where we're wrong. And I'm not saying you. I'm including myself into this. I accept responsibility that I was that way. I thought for sure that I could handle it, and I couldn't. I Lord knows. I mean, I tried multiple things for 2 years before I actually went and talked to somebody. And when I say talk to somebody, you can consider it whatever you want to, whether it be talking to God, whether it be talking to your parents, your spouse, a battle buddy, a fellow Marine, whatever the case may be. Let somebody know, because let's just use this for instance. Today, you and I actually went out and had lunch with a younger soldier who just came to work with performance, right? He said he's actually lost previously I think he said this year.
Yep.
Lost his best friend. They actually had plans this summer. And he said all he had to do was tell somebody.
Yep.
And we do a great job of hiding what we're really going through. And sometimes we can tell. We, as in the people who have lived through that, it's that awkward quietness. It's that 1,000-yard stare or whatever it may be. And I'm not saying walk up to these people and say, hey, man, what's wrong? Hey, what's going on with you? But I am saying this. Recognize that. And if you do recognize that, it's your responsibility at that point to tell somebody.
I think as of today, I can name 8 individuals that I serve with who have taken their own life as a means of a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right. And that's not the right answer. It's not. I've come to know that there's a lot more people out there that love you and that care about you than you could ever possibly imagine. Yep. And here with performance, like yesterday, and I've mentioned this several times prior to the podcast, We have 477 veterans and spouses that work with performance right now. That's a large number to work with one single company. And we're stretched from one side of the country to the other, north, south, east, and west. I do the best that I can to let as many know as possible, even through this podcast, that they have someone representing them. They have someone that's there for them should they need something. You don't necessarily have to call the VA. You don't necessarily have to call our EAP program, although it's there for you should you need it. My number is all over our website. I will talk to you about anything and everything you want to talk about. I'm not saying that I completely understand what it is that you're going through, but I can definitely put you in touch with somebody who can. Yep. That's what this is all about. This is the mission is to let people know that, hey, one, you're not alone. There is literal hell in the transition from military to civilian world. That is one of the hardest things that we deal with. You don't have to battle that alone. You don't.
It's almost like you lose your complete identity.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, and I mentioned this last night over dinner. One of the biggest things that I miss is the camaraderie, right? Mm-hmm. And then the uniform. I can't put into words how much I miss it and why. I really don't know. I can't tell you why. I miss being in Iraq. Why? I really don't know. Because I didn't leave anything back over there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
apparently I did.
Well, I mean, I do. I miss it like crazy. And I think about it every single day. It's been 20 years. Again, I guess it's the body acting. It's the body and the mind acting its certain way in accordance with what I did, right? And I accept that, and I consider that normal now. I am who I am. My wife, she helps me in any way I need help. Talking to you, you help me. Talking to you who all are in the field working for performance, or those who don't work for performance that are actually watching this. You help me in a sense. I'll talk to anybody and everybody in the mission to save veterans. Yep. That's what it's about.
And, another one of the big things that I always try to stress with, individuals that are in that transition and, having those problems, finding a temporary solution, i.e. finding sleep at the bottom of a bottle, is never a good fix.
Right. That's exactly right.
We have a tendency of, especially us vets, like we talked about earlier, being very stubborn and headstrong, thinking that I can do this, and self-medicating. Mm. Some folks self-medicate through alcohol. Some folks self-medicate through, other means of numbing themselves so that they don't have to feel those feelings that they can't figure out how to adjust to and to regulate.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And some folks run, some folks work out. We all have means of learning to deal with these things.
Sure.
But alcohol and other means that change your mental state is never a good way of doing it.
Right, yeah.
It's never a good way. Nothing positive comes from it. It's not a long-term fix. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there. Believe it or not, what saved me, Mike, was going back.
You saying I need to go back? Is that what you're saying?
But
I'm not in the shape anymore.
I was in such a bad place after our first deployment, trying to transition to being a 19-year-old kid who lived by himself, mm-hmm. having an apartment, still being in the Army. So I still kind of had some bits and pieces of it. I still was on active duty. I was still around my brothers, but I was still dealing with some things.
Right.
And at 19, 20 years old, I was a full-fledged alcoholic. Like, I drank myself to sleep every night. And finally it got to, okay, you're coming off active duty. And a buddy of mine got in some trouble. Mm-hmm. And he calls me and said, hey, Judge told me I can go back to Iraq or I can go to jail.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, shit. I was going to say a bad word there.
Good catch.
But he called me and said, hey, Judge told me either I can, go back to Iraq or I can go to jail. I was like, well, dude, I'm fixing to get released off active duty. They won't renew my orders because of ABCD, just some stuff to
Right.
do with the state and the active Army. He's like, well, you want to go with me? I was like, I can go back home.
Which deployment was that?
This is my second deployment.
Oh, okay. That's right. You volunteered for your second,
So-
right? Yeah.
Short term, or long story short, I volunteered to go with a buddy, and getting back over there, and actually started talking to a psychologist during my second deployment.
Okay.
So getting back over there kind of weeded me out of some of the bad places that I was in,
Sure.
and then once I got there, I finally, okay, there's some stuff going on in my head that ain't right. I know it ain't right. I don't know how to fix it. So let me go talk to the wizard. That's what we always called the psychiatrist, the
Yeah.
wizard, because they could do some magic with your head. And I started going seeing them about once a week and just talking. People put so much negativity or, negative about seeking help for the longest time that people wouldn't go seek help because they were scared of how people was going to think of them. Don't worry about them folks. They don't matter much no how.
Right.
If you're having issues, seek help, whether it's from us, your veterans, your brothers, whatnot, whether it's from a professional, talk to somebody, because that's a lot of times where you're going to get the most benefit from. That's what's has helped me always the most. Like you were saying, is talking,
We tend to, and I said this previously, we tend to deal with things in our own way, right?
Yep.
Because that's just who we are. You might do it through silence, or like I said, the 1,000-yard stare. You however you want to deal with it. If it's getting alone in a corner, go ahead.
It's even worse for men.
Oh yeah.
And I don't say that in a sexist way, but men, whether they're military or not, don't never want to seem weak in front of other men.
Right.
You stack that military mindset on top of being a man, and it's twice as bad.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's even harder sometimes for people to get out of their own skin to accept the fact that, hey, I don't care if I look weak. I'm not weak. I'm way stronger than anybody I know, but my strength is going to be me reaching out for help.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because if I don't, there may not be a me.
Yeah. There's, for those who don't know what it's like going through what a soldier, Marine, or airman, etc., goes through, I mean, if I had videos, I'd put them up here. I mean, there's a video on YouTube of what it was like for World War II veterans, or it might have been World War I veterans that came back. It's an old video, and it shows these guys like shaking real bad and everything else. So today's war may not be to that extent, right? But you tend to notice that these people act slightly differently. And you may not know that he or she is a veteran, right? But you notice that there's something different about he or she. So you walk up to them nonchalantly, picking even, and you say, hey, man, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Dude, that is probably the worst thing on the planet to say to somebody, especially if they're a veteran. Because at that point, you're telling them that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. That they look weak. Something's the
There
matter.
is, it's just not the way we need to communicate with veterans, right? Nor spouses. That's not how we need to communicate with each other, right? Always be supportive of each other. Always let someone know that you care, you're here for them, and if there's anything that I can do for you, let me know. And again, just like I said earlier, you as a supporter need to be supportive. So if I can't help you, I will find somebody who can. And that's what makes this company a great company, because from the top, and I mean Mr. Art, Kevin, Christian, all the way down to our foreman, almost every single one of them will tell their people that, because we're great leaders. And that's what this company is all about, is building great leaders. That's what we do.
Yep.
And that's our namesake. That's our motto. We build better. We build better everything in my opinion. And this podcast is just one of the the great things that they allowed us to do.
So, do you know why we were so efficient in World War II?
Why is that?
So, post World War I, the military was downsized, right? Because that's what happens after every war. Military gets downsized, yada, yada, yada. So, I'm trying to remember exactly what general it was. I can see his face. How name doesn't matter. So he realized that, okay, they're downsizing my military. I don't have the numbers right now to fight a major war. But what I can do with the numbers I have is start working on creating leaders. So once I have established, I have an army of leaders at all levels. When a war happens and I have to fill those ranks with bodies from the draft or from enlistment like with Pearl Harbor, I've already got a leadership corps that has been trained, that understands the process, that knows the procedures. Now, I can plug and play bodies in there just like a foreman can a crew, and I can get stuff done.
Right.
Because I have put the time and effort into my leadership and into those individuals to make sure that they are ready and they are prepared.
That's exactly right.
And the people, for lack of a better term, what you would call hands or what we would call Joes, you point, they go, they do.
That's right.
But you also understand how to relate and deal with those Joes as far as those leadership policies, those leadership principles, those understanding of individuals, that intercommunication skills, empathy, not sympathy, that type of stuff.
No, that's great.
That goes straight back to, like you said, building leaders.
That's right.
Because that's what it takes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we spent the last several minutes kind of going off into our tours and everything. So let's kind of backtrack a little bit and into your current career. So you're done with your deployments up until when was your last deployment?
So I got home from my last rotation, my last military deployment. I got home in August of 2012, and then I turned right around and left a few weeks later and went to Israel, and then I wound up getting home from Israel mid to late 13.
Okay. So that was your last deployment.
Yep.
All right.
I got back stateside mid to late 13, and I've been here ever since.
Okay. So now you're like I said, you're a Sergeant First Class, you're an E7. What is it that you're doing now?
So now I work at the Maneuver Senior Leader course. So as you progress throughout the military career, which we have different ranks for your NCOs, which is your non-commissioned officers, your enlisted leaders. They go to different level schools as they progress through their career to help them with understanding what their job duties and responsibilities are, learning about different concepts and theories when it comes to leadership, how to communicate and interact with individuals who they're trying to influence, motivate, and inspire, things of that nature. So for a while there, I taught the Advanced Leader course, which is your young E5s trying to be, getting ready to become E6s.
Right.
And now I teach at the Senior Leader course, which is your E6s getting ready to be E7s. And pretty much I teach everything from negotiation skills down to how to fill out certain forms.
Oh, wow.
It is a huge, broad span of different topics that's directly related to, what they need to have an understanding of in order to go out and become a platoon sergeant.
Well, that's a lot different than being in a combat zone, right?
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, we go through this transitional period, and I've being in the military, whether it be regular Army, and I'll speak from the Army's perspective, whether it be your regular Army or active duty Army or Reserve or National Guard, you go through two transitions, right? You're transitioning from deployment to home life, right? And then at some point, you're going to probably transition from military life to civilian life.
Yep. That's a hard transition.
Absolutely. And some people make both of those transitions at the same time.
Yep.
I was one of them. So when you transitioned from deployment to home. Was it difficult? I mean, did you know that you wanted to stay in the military?
So when I transitioned from my last deployment back home, there really wasn't much of a transition out of the military.
Okay.
So, and I say that, so when I got home from Israel in 2013, I was a young, freshly promoted E6 staff sergeant. I went to work at a schoolhouse. Like, I went to work teaching what used to be known as Warrior Leader Course,
Okay.
which is the very first leadership school that soldiers go to, previously known as PLDC. Now it's known as BLC, Basic Leader Course.
Okay.
So I, within a week or two of coming home from Israel, I flowed right into that.
Okay.
I'd done that for about a year and a half. And you know, they always say leadership or retention is a reflection of leadership, right?
Right.
So I had some leadership at the time with some individuals that I didn't care for. I didn't like their style. I didn't like the way they done business, and I was burnt out on it. You know, I've got all these deployments stacked up, all this just, I've seen it. This is what's important. You're making a mountain out of a molehill that don't mean nothing.
Yep. Sure.
And their leadership pretty much run me off. And when I say that as the way they led, I let myself out the door.
Okay.
So I left there and then transitioned and actually got out.
So you got out of the military.
2016, I got out.
Okay.
I was out for 5 years.
Was that a difficult time for you? Do you think?
So I got out without a plan. It was a knee-jerk reaction. I was at 12 years, and that leadership just was bad, and I was burnt out. I knew that I needed a break, but I hadn't set myself up for success prior to. Like I said, it was I'm done this, and
Right.
I'm gone.
Was there a personal struggle throughout that period? I mean, the point to where you regretted it, maybe? I mean,
So I never.
or did you know that you needed to make some changes?
I know that I knew that I needed a break and I needed to make some changes.
Okay. Okay.
I also knew when I got out that I wasn't done. Like, I got out knowing that I was coming back.
Okay.
When was the only thing to be determined.
Okay.
But I had already had too much time vested, but I knew I needed a break. Like, I needed to step away.
Okay.
That I was coming back, I just didn't know when. And everybody that knew me when I got out said, yeah, we know you're coming back. We'll see you when you get back.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah, we'll see
right.
you when you get back. They didn't think it would be 5 years, though.
Right.
I didn't think it would be 5 years when I left, but it wound up being 5 years.
So what was the some of the things that you had done during your 5-year hiatus?
So I had done some construction work here, a little bit here and there between some of my deployments.
Okay.
I had done welding in high school, so I had a technical degree in welding.
Okay.
Had learned to fit pipe, worked at a fab shop for a little while down where's it off of? It's off Ship Island Parkway. GIS, Grand Isle Shipyard, used to have a little fab shop right there.
Yeah.
Going out towards, was that Dolphin Island? Yes, Dolphin Island.
I think so.
Worked there. And then I had a buddy of mine call me and ask me if I was scared of heights. Like, no, man, I ain't scared of heights. I jump off bridges for fun. So I got hired on to climb cell phone towers. So I went to work climbing cell phone towers. And then within a period of about 2.5 years, because I had so much experience managing personnel and I was organized and I understood people, it didn't take long to be the shiniest rock in the box.
Right.
And I don't say that in a bad way, but just the way I handled business and the way I conducted myself as coming from an E6 who that was what I'd done for the last 12 years, it fit right into me managing people and pushing crews and moved into management. And we all know management's hard. Keeping good help, keeping materials flowing. And that is a gypsy industry.
Right.
Like, that is a gypsy industry. Over the last 15 years, pay has went up across industrial construction. I ain't going to say adequately, but it has went up.
Right.
In the telecommunications construction side of things, you've got a foreman with 8 years experience who is lucky to make $22 an hour. Like,
wow.
So finding good help for that money is impossible.
Right.
And it finally got to the point where I was just stressed. I was running 18 hours a day all over the place, trying to make sure crews were working, just running myself ragged.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife finally looked at me one day and she said, if you don't find something different, this is going to kill you. And so I took a hard look at myself and took a step back and said, you know what, you're right.
Mm.
And so I told the owner of the company that I was a construction manager for. I was like, hey, I'm going to have to find something different. I told him, I was like, I love you. And you mean the world to me. I was like, but this isn't good for my health anymore.
Right.
Because I refuse to fail. I refuse to not be a good leader. But this is so bad that it is just detrimental to my health. I'm down to 160 pounds.
Mm.
I look like I'm on meth, which I've never even seen in my life. I'm sleeping like 2 or 3 hours a night.
Right.
It's horrible for my health. All because of my pride. And like I said, I refuse to fail or to not be that manager, that leader that somebody else deserves.
You think that's the soldier in you?
Yes, very much.
That's what I was thinking too.
And a buddy of mine said, hey, man, have you ever thought about getting your CWIs? I never really dawned on me. He said, y'all think about it. So I hopped on the internet, pulled up AWS. Yep, I meet all those standards and requirements. I got that much money. I'm going to go to this 2-week school. And I'll be damned if I didn't pass it the first time. I surprised a lot of people. Because I don't know how many QCs you know, but there's a bunch of them that have had to take that test 2 or 3 times. It's a pretty good failure rate. So I wound up getting my CWIs and then started looking for a job. Luckily, there is a really good friend of mine who works in this organization that has nothing to do with quality. He is now a safety man. And he was a foreman at Elba Island in Savannah in the laydown yard. And me and him just happened to be talking, and I told him that, I was looking for something. And he said, hey, man, did you ever hang any iron, stack any towers? And I was like, yeah, I've done everything you can do. I've been on big iron, red iron, stacked cell phone towers up to, 400 foot. He's like, well, they hanging big iron up here in Savannah, and they looking for people. I was like, turn my name in. And so went there, wound up leaving there whenever everything kind of happened at Elba Island.
Yeah.
Went to Mitsubishi, was there for 6-8 months, and then got lucky enough that performance gave me my first opportunity, as a QC at Chevron, and worked an outage with them, and then there just kind of grew into myself, made some, other connections, and wound up actually, leaving performance and going to work for TEI and a couple other companies, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And got laid off, and I'm sitting at home. Money's getting short.
Yeah.
Unemployment's running out. I think everybody kind of went through that worry.
Yeah.
And I got to just sitting there one day and like, what in the world can I do? Like, where is there money to be made right now? What do I have to do? Because I refuse to fail. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know somebody that don't ever miss a check. Uncle Sam.
That's right.
So I called a buddy of mine that I'd served with who was in recruiting and retention. He goes, I've been waiting on this call.
Really?
He said, I knew it was coming. I just been waiting on it. He's like, I was hoping you was going to make it before I moved, out of this position and went somewhere else within the AGR program. And that was September the 3rd of 2020. I re-enlisted almost instantly, went back to teaching at the basic leader course for about a year. Mm-hmm. From there, I transitioned over to the infantry advanced leader course. Was there for about 2.5 years. Picked up my E7, sergeant first class, And now I teach the Maneuver Senior Leader course, and that's
Wow.
to today.
The rest is history, huh?
Rest is happening as we speak.
Right. Right. Well, it's hard to put our lives and the importance of our lives into a 45-minute or an hour segment. I've got John behind the camera. He's the one that helps us put all this together. And he does an outstanding job of putting this on for us, and then going through the whole editing process. But it's really difficult to put our lives in a podcast and keep it in a segment, to keep it interesting. And I've had people ask me, hey, can you shorten it or can you even lengthen it? You're going to have different opinions all over the place. But to me, I want to know your story. If it takes me 30 minutes to know your story, then so be it. But if it takes me 2 hours to know your story, then so be it. It's not about the quantity of listeners to me. I want to reach the people who need this message or reach the people who can use this message to help others. That's what it's about to me. So for you to come in and sit here for however long we've been doing this now today, and actually, I mean, this is the second time we've done it. We had some technical difficulties the first time, and John worked his magic behind the camera. We just did it again, right? So I want to thank you, Daniel, from the bottom of my heart. I mean it, and I sincerely mean it from the bottom of my heart, how thankful I am for you to drive all the way from Mississippi to come all the way over here to Baton Rouge, sit in this thing with me, and join me in this mission, right? And I tell you all the time, or I have recently, and I tell John all the time, how important this position and this job is for me. I think that I represent performance the best that I possibly can in the effort to serve our veterans and the veteran spouses in this company and outside of this company. We're trying to keep veterans off the street. We're trying to employ our veterans and our veteran spouses. That is another part of the big mission, right? And that's what actually helped me, was finding another mission, right? I mean,
we kind of talked about that.
Right.
Purpose.
Exactly. It's been literally drilled into us, and I can, with the Army, we are mission operative. We're looking for that next mission.
I need a purpose. I need a goal. I need an objective. I need
That's
something that in the Army you don't have to like it.
That's it.
In the civilian side, it helps if you like it.
That's it. That's exactly right. And here's what performance does. Performance will give you that mission. Performance will give you that mission, that opportunity. I promise you, had you not joined the military again, performance would have probably picked you right back up, and we'd have done something with Daniel Wade. I can speak multitudes to each and every one of you who are watching or listening. Performance is doing great things for you, or they can do great things for you. So, in closing, Daniel, I'd like to ask you, I know you've shared a lot of really, really good information, but what I like to do before we close out is to ask you or give you the opportunity to share a message with everybody who's listening or watching. So go ahead and share, just a personal message that you would like to put out there.
Kind of got me on that one. Let's see. I'm a firm believer that nobody does anything alone other than go to the bathroom.
Right.
Don't ever look down on anybody that helped you get where you're at.
Oh, yeah.
And that effort is a reflection of leadership. So if you're a leader and you're not getting the effort out of your hands, your people, whatever it is that you think they should be putting, take a step back and look at yourself. Self-reflection and being honest with oneself is the first step of being a good leader. You need to know your strengths, your weaknesses, and evaluate yourself honestly for what you are and make changes in order to improve. Leadership is a process. Get better every day.
That's outstanding. Couldn't have put it better myself. Well, with that said, Daniel, again, I want to thank you for coming out, sharing your life story with us, literally from Neely, Mississippi, all the way to sitting at the performance contractor's office doing a podcast with old Mike Farve and John Emerson. I want to thank you. I can't tell you how much this means to me. It's all, literally haven't spent this much time together in 20 years.
A long time.
Right? Well, 19 to be exact. I mean, so this is I feel as if I've needed this, I've deserved this, and this gives me that much more motivation.
They say brothers can step away for 10 years and pick up the conversation like they never lost it.
That's right.
And I love you. It has been an honor. I have thoroughly enjoyed dinner last night and our conversation today. It was very much needed, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, again, we appreciate having you. And in closing, talking to you all who have actually spent the time to tune in and watch or listen, I say it all the time. I want to thank you for tuning in and putting up with me and Daniel, in some of our camaraderie that we share on the podcast today. But on a serious note, if there's someone out there who's struggling, regardless if they're a veteran or not, and you recognize that or you're suspicious of that, don't keep that to yourself. We're all about saving lives, right? We do what we can to keep people off the street, to keep people maintaining a job, whatever the case may be. Don't be quiet. Tell somebody. Talk to somebody. Let's be somebody's friend, right? We all need somebody. So if you need somebody, let somebody know. This is Mike Farve, signing off.